Not every adventure begins with a roar. Some start with a tow truck. Over the years, a few motorcycle engines have earned a reputation. Not for where they'll take you, but for how often they'll leave you stranded on the side of some godforsaken trail. Today, we're diving into the bikes that looked ready for anything, until they weren't. These mechanical nightmares are about to save you thousands in heartbreak and repair bills. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for number 1. Because that bike, it literally earned the nickname Widowmaker. 10. Harley-Davidson Twin Cam 88, 1999 to 2002. The Milwaukee meltdown look? I get it. You see a Harley Twin Cam 88 from the early 2000s, and you think American Iron, baby. But here's the thing. This particular chunk of Milwaukee engineering is about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. When Harley dropped the Twin Cam 88 in 1999, it was supposed to be their answer to modern reliability. 88 cubic inches of V-twin thunder, right? Wrong. What they actually delivered was a masterclass in how plastic parts and oil pumps absolutely do not mix. That 1,450cc air-cooled V-twin looked bulletproof on paper. But those plastic cam chain tensioners? Oh man. They disintegrate like confetti at a New Year's party, sending metal scraping straight into your oil pump. And here's the kicker. No warning signs. One day you're cruising, the next day you're looking at catastrophic engine failure. We're talking complete engine seizure between 15,000 and 35,000 miles. The plastic shoe material would literally contaminate the oil pump, causing oil starvation that would kill the motor dead. Adventure riders who trusted these early twin cams learned the hard way that remote breakdowns aren't just inconvenient, they're wallet-crushing. I've seen guys stuck in the middle of nowhere with oil pump failures, looking at rebuild costs that exceeded what they paid for the bike. The 1999 models were the worst offenders. Oil pump issues, crankshaft runout, base gasket leaks. It was like Harley engineered a time bomb with handlebars. But plastic problems? That's nothing compared to what the Czechs cooked up in the 70s. Coming up, a bike so bad, even the Iron Curtain couldn't contain its reputation. 9. CZ250 Enduro, 1970s. The Czech wrecker. Ever heard the phrase, "you get what you pay for"? Well, the CZ250 Enduro proves that sometimes you get way less than what you paid for. CZ tried to crack the Western Enduro market with this 250cc air-cooled single. What they delivered was a mechanical disaster wrapped in communist-era optimism and held together with hopes and dreams. That 250cc thumper came standard with a G-Koff carburetor that had one job: deliver fuel to the engine. Instead, it would flood the motor if you forgot to shut off the petcocks before parking. And I mean, flood. Like, why is there gas pouring out of my exhaust pipe flood? But wait, there's more. Cracking fuel lines that would split if you looked at them sideways. A gas cap that leaked like a sieve. And my personal favorite, a dry clutch that would warp if you used it like, you know, an actual clutch. Riders quickly learned to carry spare everything. Fuel lines, clutch plates, carburetor jets, and a healthy sense of humor. Most guys swapped that G-Koff carb for a Mikuni before the first oil change, just to make the thing rideable. The stock suspension? Garbage. The rims? Replaced immediately. It was like buying a motorcycle kit where half the parts were designed to fail. At least the CZ was cheap to fix when it inevitably broke. This next British disaster? Not so much. 8. CCM GP450 Adventure, the British Breakdown King. Here's a bike that earned the title, most unreliable motorbike in the world, from its own frustrated owners. That's not hyperbole. That's a direct quote from a guy who owned one. CCM promised adventure-ready performance with their GP450. Lightweight, off-road capable, British engineering. What could go wrong? Everything. Literally everything. That Kymco-designed 450cc Enduro engine was actually decent when it was running. The problem? It was never running. We're talking about a bike where the front mudguard stays would fracture, the exhaust header pipe would split, and the horn bracket would snap off just for fun. But here's where it gets really good. The electric fuel pump. When it failed, and it would fail, you had to tear apart half the bike just to replace it. We're talking hours of labor for a part that should take 10 minutes to swap. One owner documented 19 breakdowns in a 3-week trip. 19. That's almost 1 breakdown per day. The factory response? Radio silence. Most garages took one look at a CCM and suddenly remembered they had other appointments. Resale values crashed so hard that owners called it throwing money down the drain. These bikes were so unreliable that dealers started bundling free gear, service credits, even waiving storage fees just to get them off the lot. But British build quality looks premium compared to this vintage Japanese screamer that came with its own built-in self-destruct sequence. 7. Yamaha SC500, 1973 to 1974. The Yamaha seizure machine. Picture this. It's 1973, and Yamaha decides to build a 500cc 2-stroke motocross weapon. Sounds awesome, right? Well, it would have been if they'd remembered to make it actually work. The SC500 packed a 498 cubic centimeter single-cylinder 2-stroke that cranked out serious power. The problem? It delivered that power like a light switch. Either nothing or, holy crap. Where did the front wheel go? This thing ran hotter than asphalt in July, detonated like a hand grenade, and seized pistons so regularly that one reviewer suggested Yamaha should have offered pistons in 6-packs for convenience. The power delivery was just the beginning. The handling was absolutely brutal. Overly light front end that would wash out in corners, poor weight distribution that made it wheelie at the worst possible moments, and suspension that would shake violently at speed. Riders who stuck with the SC500 learned to carry a complete rebuild kit. Not because they were optimistic, because they were realistic. The engine was nearly impossible to jet correctly, which meant it ran either too rich or too lean, both of which led to expensive problems. 2-stroke drama is one thing, but when Honda's 4-stroke thumpers start acting like hand grenades, you know something's seriously wrong. 6. Honda CR450R, 1981, and CR500R, 1984. The Honda hand grenades. Honda built these bikes for one purpose: to go fast and scare the hell out of whoever was brave enough to ride them. Mission accomplished on both counts. The CR450's 430cc engine had what riders politely called light switch power delivery. What that actually meant was you'd be putting along at 3,000 RPM, twist the throttle, and suddenly find yourself in orbit with no warning whatsoever. The CR500 was even worse. That 491 cubic centimeter motor came with mid-range detonation that was genuinely alarming, especially in sand. Plus, it had handling characteristics that one rider described as tracking like a buffalo on steroids. These weren't beginner bikes. They were barely manageable by experts. The clutch would overheat in desert conditions, the handling was unpredictable at best, and the power delivery could launch you into the next county without notice. Smart riders learned to keep these things in a tall gear and short shift constantly. Not because it was faster, but because it was the only way to survive the ride without getting bucked off like a mechanical bull. At least Honda's problems were predictable once you figured them out. This Austrian adventure bike? Pure lottery. 5. KTM 790/890 Adventure, 2018 to 2020. The Orange Gamble. Now we're getting into more recent territory, which makes this one sting even more. KTM's 790 Adventure looked like the perfect middleweight ADV bike on paper. Then reality hit. That 799 cubic centimeter parallel twin made solid power and had all the right adventure bike credentials. But early models, we're talking 2018 to 2020, started developing excessive camshaft wear. And I'm not talking about normal wear after 100,000 miles. I'm talking about premature failure that could leave you with poor starting, weird engine noises, and reduced power. The causes ranged from insufficient lubrication to improper metal hardness in the camshafts. Some owners reported dirt particles getting into the engine, but honestly, that shouldn't kill a camshaft on an adventure bike. KTM claims less than 0.5% of bikes were affected, but there's literally a Facebook group called KTM Failed Camshafts, 799/890 and 901, with thousands of members. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Adventure riders need reliability above all else. When you're 200 miles from the nearest town, you don't want to be wondering if your camshafts are going to hold up. KTM offered goodwill repairs, but the damage to confidence was already done. But camshaft problems seem minor compared to this German single's identity crisis. Coming up, a bike that vibrated like a paint mixer and stalled like a nervous teenager. Number 4. BMW F650 Single, early models. The Bavarian buzzer BMW entering the single-cylinder adventure market should have been a home run. German engineering, proven reliability, adventure bike credibility. What could go wrong? Well, turns out that 652cc Single had some serious personality disorders. The vibration above 4,000 RPM was absolutely brutal. We're talking hand-numbing, spine-rattling, why did I buy this thing levels of buzz. But the vibration was just the warm-up act. Early F650s had a charming habit of stalling at idle and during deceleration. The causes were all over the map. Fuel system problems, faulty throttle bodies, loose air intake sensors, even defective ECU firmware. Engine mounting bolts would vibrate loose regularly. The charging system would fail. Water pump bearings would shatter. And don't get me started on the electrical gremlins that could leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere. Riders reported everything from condensation in the instrument panel to complete electrical failures. One guy described his F650 as having bad electrics that made it unreliable for any serious adventure riding. German engineering struggles are embarrassing, but this Japanese disappointment was just heartbreaking. 3. Yamaha Tanere 660, 2009. The Tanere letdown. The Tanere name carries serious desert racing credibility. When you hear Tanere, you think of Dakar rallies and epic adventures across the Sahara. The 2009 model year? Not so much. This particular year was specifically cited for frequent breakdowns and unmet expectations. And we're not talking about minor issues. We're talking about problems that could strand you in the middle of nowhere. That 660cc Single was generally bulletproof in other years, but 2009 models suffered from cam bearing failures, especially when oil levels dropped even slightly. The symptoms? Weird rattly noises, poor starting, and eventually complete bearing failure. But wait, there's more. Jerky throttle response that made city riding a nightmare. Mid-rev hunting that made highway cruising impossible. And stalling issues that could be caused by everything from wiring harness problems to fuel injection failures. Adventure riders who chose the 2009 Tanere often found themselves dealing with expensive cam-bearing replacements and frustrating fuel delivery issues. The bike's legendary reputation for reliability took a serious hit that year, but even Yamaha's worst year looks good compared to this Suzuki disaster that proved even cockroaches can have bad years. 2. Suzuki DR 650 SE 2009. The DR disaster. The DR 650 SE built its bulletproof reputation on one simple principle. It just works. Air-cooled single, basic suspension, minimal electronics. What could possibly go wrong? Well, 2009 proved that even the most dependable bikes can have off years. The big problem? The neutral sending unit, basically a sensor that tells you when you're in neutral, was held in place by screws that had a nasty habit of loosening up. Here's where it gets scary. If those screws fell into the engine, you were looking at complete engine damage. We're talking about a $50 sensor potentially destroying a $5,000 motor. But that wasn't the only issue. Base gasket leaks were common, turning your garage floor into an oil slick. The primary gear retaining nut could work loose, causing transmission problems. Wire harnesses would chafe against sharp edges, leading to electrical failures. DR riders who bought 2009 models learned to check NSU screws religiously and carry extra gasket sealant. While most issues were fixable, they shouldn't have existed on a bike famous for bulletproof reliability. But our number one spot goes to a bike that didn't just break down. It actively tried to hurt you. Number 1. Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, 1971. The Widowmaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the top of our list, and this one's special. The Suzuki TM400 Cyclone didn't just earn a spot on Worst Bikes Ever lists, it earned the nickname Widowmaker. Suzuki's attempt at a 400cc motocross weapon looked promising on paper. In reality, it was a dangerous, unpredictable machine that was less motorcycle and more mechanical roulette. That 400cc two-stroke had what riders called light switch power delivery, but that doesn't do it justice. This thing could kick in without warning at any RPM. You'd be putting along at 2000 RPM, hit a bump, and suddenly find yourself launched into space with zero warning. The crude CDI ignition system was erratic at best. Inconsistent spark advance meant the power could hit like a sledgehammer or disappear completely, sometimes in the same corner. But here's where it gets really scary. The frame was considered flimsy and would flex significantly under load. Combined with ill-handling chassis geometry and subpar suspension, this thing was genuinely dangerous. Riders who survived the TM400 experience described it as unmanageable, even for experts. Power surges that defied physics, handling that could send you off course without warning, and a chassis that gave up under load. This wasn't just unreliable, it was actively trying to hurt you. The combination of unpredictable power, flexible frame, and crude ignition made it a recipe for disaster. Even experienced motocross riders called it dangerous. Suzuki made some improvements throughout its production run from 1971 to 1975, trying to tame the power delivery and improve the handling, but the damage was done. The TM400 never escaped its reputation as a bike that was more likely to put you in the hospital than get you to the finish line. The TM400 became a cautionary tale in motorcycle design. It proved that raw power without proper engineering is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. This thing didn't just break down, it broke riders. So there you have it. 10 adventure bike engines that prove not all mechanical problems are created equal. Some will just leave you stranded. Others will actively try to hurt you. Here's the thing about buying used adventure bikes. Reputation matters, but so does the specific year and model. A bike can be bulletproof for decades and then have one terrible year that ruins everything. Before you hand over your hard-earned cash for that deal of a lifetime, do your homework. Check the forums, talk to owners, and for the love of all that's holy, avoid these specific engines and years. Got questions about adventure bike reliability? Drop them in the comments below. And if you've been burned by any of these engines, share your horror story. Misery loves company, and other riders need to know what they're getting into. Hit that subscribe button if you want more no-nonsense motorcycle advice that could save you thousands. Because trust me, there are plenty more mechanical nightmares out there, and we're just getting started. And remember, ride safe, wrench smart, and always do your research before you buy. See you on the next one.